Caitlin Clark's billion-dollar dilemma didn't come from Nike or ESPN. It's rooted in Riyadh. With Saudi investments pouring into Project B, the kingdom's latest target isn't oil or soccer. It's the heart of women's basketball. The plan is clear. Buy legitimacy by signing Clark, dangle $5 billion, and quietly reframe the conversation around sports, power, and human rights.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
The move has caught athletes off guard and left the WNBA scrambling. A league built on struggle and solidarity is suddenly staring down the barrel of financial domination, and not everyone is taking it quietly. Clark's potential departure would do more than shift the competitive balance. It would signal that even a league built on progress can be bought. Project B's off-season strategy seems harmless on paper, but with $2 million salaries for mid-tier players, the message is ruthless: play with us or get left behind. As ethical concerns about Saudi funding mount, Clark's next move will set a precedent for how far women's sports is willing to go for financial security and what it's willing to leave behind in the process. Aya Wilson suspended after a heated blow-up with teammates, just as Caitlin Clark is being courted with billion-dollar offers from a shadowy, Saudi-backed basketball league. The timing is either totally coincidental or a brutal sign of where things are heading in women's basketball. And spoiler, it's at the center of the chaos is Project B, a mysterious new league reportedly backed by Saudi money, offering WNBA star Caitlin Clark more in one season than she'll earn in her entire WNBA career. We're talking base salaries of $2 million, with bonuses and endorsements likely stacked on top. And this isn't just about cash. This is about control, about power, about who gets to own the future of women's sports. Let's be clear, Project B isn't trying to support the WNBA. It's trying to restructure the entire system by targeting its most bankable star. Clark's marketability isn't just impressive, it's foundational. Her influence on viewership and attendance isn't theoretical. It's proven. When she got injured, ratings immediately dropped by over 50%. That's not a coincidence. That's the kind of leverage Project B is counting on. So while the WNBA is trying to grow slowly, build loyalty, and develop the game, Project B is taking a shortcut. By the face of the league, by the fans, by the headlines, and you've instantly got legitimacy. And it's not subtle. Clark isn't just the first choice. She's the only choice that really matters to this league's launch. They're building the whole thing around her. But here's where it gets even more controversial. The money behind Project B? It's not just any billionaire venture capital firm. The reported financial backers are tied to Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 project. That means this isn't just a new league. It's part of a state-driven plan to improve the country's global image through sports, despite a very public track record of human rights violations, especially when it comes to women. This is the definition of sports washing, and it's playing out in real time. So now Caitlin Clark, and every player watching this unfold, is stuck in a brutally complicated position. Say yes to Project B, and you're signing up for historic money, but also for a league funded by a regime that has actively restricted women's rights. Say no, and you're staying loyal to a league that hasn't always protected you or paid you what you're worth. It's an impossible situation, and it's starting to break people. Reports of internal tension among WNBA players aren't surprising. Aya Wilson, one of the league's most recognizable and accomplished stars, was reportedly suspended after a heated incident with teammates. While the details are limited, the timing's volumes. Wilson, along with players like Angel Ree, has been holding the league together while Clark gets nearly all of the media attention and now, potentially, the biggest contract in women's basketball history from outside the league. And that's where the real fracture lies. It's not just that Clark's getting a massive offer. It's that the rest of the league isn't. Project B isn't coming for Wilson. It's not courting Angel. It's not offering big contracts across the board. It's targeting Clark because they know she's the marketing engine. She's the viewership. She's the business model. And that kind of focus has consequences. Players who've sacrificed, who've helped grow the WNBA from the ground up, are watching one person become the sole priority, not just for the league's future, but for a brand new league that's trying to replace it. That's not about jealousy. That's about structural inequality. That's about a league and a sport that still hasn't figured out how to grow without alienating the very people who built it. Project B is playing this perfectly. They're not launching with a full-blown rival schedule. They're starting with just 6 teams playing during the WNBA offseason. On paper, it sounds harmless. Just extra games, more exposure, more money. But that's not the end game. That's the Trojan horse. Start small. Don't compete yet. Get players used to the checks. Get media used to the coverage. Get fans invested. And when the time comes, start expanding. More teams, more coverage, eventually overlapping seasons. And just like that, the WNBA becomes the second option. And here's the problem. It could work. If Project B pulls Clark, the rest may follow. Mid-tier players, who make less than many G League athletes, are being offered salaries up to $2 million per season. That's not just life-changing. That's enough to drain the WNBA of its depth and its star power. And once that starts, the league's competitive edge fades. Viewership drops, sponsorships pull back, and the vicious cycle begins. All because a rival league figured out what the WNBA has struggled with for decades. Pay your players what they're worth, and they'll show up. But at what cost? Because the ethics here aren't just background noise. This is Saudi money. This is a regime known for surveillance, repression, and blatant restrictions on women. No matter how shiny the contract, the moral weight is undeniable. Accepting that money means accepting where it comes from. That's not an easy call for any player, especially one whose brand is tied to empowerment and progress. Clark's decision doesn't just affect her. It affects everyone: players, fans, execs, the entire league infrastructure. If she says yes, she'll be changing the definition of loyalty in professional sports. And she'll be signaling that even the most iconic, culture-defining league in women's basketball isn't enough when the money is this big and the treatment is this unbalanced. And maybe she's right, because loyalty doesn't pay the bills. And playing for a league that only protects you when it's convenient doesn't feel like loyalty. It feels like settling. Clark still has time to decide. The league isn't launching until 2026. That gives her leverage. She can watch how the WNBA reacts, whether they invest in her protection, whether they market her and the rest of the league's stars with equal urgency, whether they give players a reason to stay that isn't just emotional. But if nothing changes, it's hard to see how they hold the line, because the WNBA's current business model is built on borrowed time. The league has grown, yes, but not fast enough and not fairly. And now that real money is being waved in front of players' faces, the cracks are impossible to ignore. This is a moment of reckoning. Either the league adapts, raises salaries, protects its talent, and finally builds a structure where players don't feel like they're carrying the whole thing on their backs, or it risks watching its stars walk away. And they won't be walking into some vague overseas league. They'll be walking into a highly organized, media-ready, capital-rich alternative with the biggest global spotlight backing it. Clark's decision is the tipping point. It's the test of whether the WNBA can hold on to the future, or whether the future is already being bought by someone else. So what do you think? Is Caitlin Clark obligated to stay? Should players take the money, even if the source is controversial? And can the WNBA survive if Project B becomes the new standard? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We're watching this unfold in real time. Like if you're stunned by the numbers being thrown around. Share this if you think more people need to understand how deep this moment runs. And if you want to stay in the loop on every dramatic twist, from locker room tension to billion-dollar betrayals, subscribe. We've only just hit the first quarter. Because if there's one thing this saga proves, it's that the future of women's basketball isn't being decided in boardrooms or highlight reels. It's being decided in back-channel meetings, private offers, and under-the-table negotiations. And while fans are arguing about fouls and stats on Twitter, the very foundation of the league is shifting beneath their feet. Project B isn't trying to complement the WNBA. It's trying to redefine what women's basketball looks like at the highest level. 6 teams, Saudi investment, a billion-dollar war chest, A calendar designed to sneak into the WNBA off-season and steal players while everyone's still catching their breath. It's not a coincidence. It's a strategy, one that preys on exhaustion, low pay, and lack of protection. And it's working. Let's be honest. The WNBA is vulnerable. For years, players have been asked to accept less. Less money, less attention, less respect. They've been forced to play overseas during the off-season just to survive financially. While the league makes slow progress, these women have been carrying the sport on their backs. So when someone finally comes in offering life-changing money, of course players are listening. Because for a long time, it's felt like no one else was. Now, the league is being asked to answer a very uncomfortable question. Can actually compete? Not on values, not on legacy, on cash, on opportunity, on security. Injury, and as that question hangs in the air, players are watching Caitlin Clark more closely than ever. Because whether she likes it or not, she's the test case. The blueprint. The first domino. If she says yes, it tells every player in the league, every college recruit, every young athlete dreaming of going pro, that the real money, the real spotlight, the real respect, it's elsewhere. And if she says no, then she becomes the person holding the line. The face of a league that still believes it can grow on its own terms. But here's the twist. Even if she stays, the damage might already be done. Because just the existence of Project B has forced the WNBA's flaws into the spotlight. Suddenly everyone's talking about pay disparity, about favoritism, about protection, or lack thereof. And Clark's own injury, an injury that sent ratings plummeting, only made it clearer. The league hasn't done nearly enough to invest in its most valuable assets. Aya Wilson, let's talk about that 55% viewership drop. One injury, one player, over half the audience gone. That's not just a stat, it's a warning siren. It proves how dependent the league has become on Clark's presence. And it shows how little margin for error they have. Because if the WNBA can't protect the player that literally drives its ratings, how can it expect her or any player to turn down a safer, better-paid option? That's where the tension really lives. In the gap between what the league says it values and how it actually operates. Look no further than the reported tension inside the locker room. Aya Wilson, two-time MVP, Olympic gold medalist, arguably the face of the WNBA before Clark's rise, suspended after a heated incident with teammates. That doesn't happen in a vacuum. That's a symptom of a deeper frustration that's been building for years. It's because while Clark is getting the press tours, the viral interviews, and now a billion-dollar offer from a rival league, players like Wilson and Angel Reese are wondering where their recognition is, where their protection is, where their payday is. This isn't about rivalry. It's about disparity. And that disparity is being weaponized by Project B. And here's the scary part. They don't need to be fair to be successful. They just need to be louder, richer, and more aggressive than the WNBA. And right now, they are. So where does this leave the fans? Stuck between a league that's underfunded and often unfair, and a new one that's exciting, well-financed, but morally questionable. If Clark takes the deal, it sets off a chain reaction that forces everyone to confront some hard truths about what we're really supporting. Can a league funded by a regime with documented restrictions on women's freedom really be the future of women's sports? Can players, especially women of color who have spent their entire careers advocating for social justice, justify joining a league that's backed by one of the most repressive governments in the world? Or is that moral high ground only sustainable until the money gets too good to ignore? Because let's be real, a $5 billion offer changes the conversation. Even if it feels wrong, even if the politics are messy, that amount of money shifts the ground. It forces players to make decisions that were never on the table before. And it forces fans to reckon with the uncomfortable truth. Maybe empowerment isn't about the league you play in. Maybe it's about finally being paid your worth, even if the source of that paycheck makes you uneasy. This is the line we're walking now. And Clark's next move will be the one that defines this era. Like WNBA, does she stay, hoping the WNBA evolves fast enough to match her value? Or does she go, cash the check, and bet that her presence can shape Project B into something better than where it started? There's no easy answer, and the WNBA isn't making it easier. Every moment of silence, every slow response, every underwhelming contract offer only pushes players closer to the edge. And Project B, they're waiting at the bottom, arms wide open, checkbooks in hand. This is the biggest crossroads in the history of women's basketball. Bigger than Title IX, bigger than the Wubble, bigger than any playoff game. Because what happens now decides whether the WNBA remains the league or just becomes a league in a growing landscape of options. The clock is ticking. So where do you land on this? Should Clark be the one to hold the line? Or is she entitled to cash in while she can? Can the WNBA reform fast enough to keep its stars? Or has it waited too long? And is it fair to ask athletes, especially women, who've already had to fight for everything, to carry the weight of geopolitics just because they're finally being paid what they're worth? Because as this whole situation snowballs, you start to realize this isn't just about Caitlin Clark making a choice. It's about the WNBA being forced to face the consequences of years of slow progress, underinvestment, and uneven treatment. And suddenly, all of that is being exposed in the most public, high-pressure way imaginable. Project B didn't create the problem. It exploited it. The pay gap, the lack of marketing, the reliance on one or two players to carry entire seasons. The way the league has struggled to elevate its veteran stars while riding the buzz of a new name like Clark. All of it has been simmering for a while. But now that there's a foreign league waving money in players' faces, everything is boiling over. And the suspension of Aya Wilson? That's not a blip. That's a red alert. Because when a star like her, someone who's given everything to the league, who's won championships, who's spoken out, showed up, and done the work, is pushed to a breaking point behind the scenes, it tells you something is seriously off. It's tension that's been building. Clark gets the headlines. Clark gets the praise. Clark gets the coverage, and now the billion-dollar payday. Meanwhile, the veterans who built this thing, they're being asked to smile, nod, and pretend this is all fair. It's not about Clark being undeserving. It's about the league being unequal. And now that inequality is exploding in the form of locker room conflicts, fractured team chemistry, and open resentment. And Project B is capitalizing on all of it. Let's go back to the structure of this new league for a second. 6 teams, off-season games, no overlap with WNBA play. On paper, it looks like a win-win, right? Play in both leagues, double your income, everyone's happy. But anyone paying attention knows that's temporary. That's the bait. Because the second Project B proves it can pull ratings, sell tickets, and generate buzz off the back of Clark or any other major star they sign, they're going to expand. They're going to push into the regular season. They're going to compete. And if they're offering $2 million to mid-tier players, more than 90% of the WNBA makes, how is the league supposed to survive? The real danger here isn't that Project B is stealing players. It's that it's exposing the WNBA's house of cards. It's showing just how fragile the league's business model is, how reliant it is on one or two names, how badly it's failed to create long-term financial security for all of its players, not just the marketable ones. And it's forcing players to confront something most of them didn't want to think about, that loyalty might not be worth it anymore. For years, players were told to be patient. That progress takes time. That things were improving. And to be fair, there's been growth. Bigger viewership numbers. Bigger brand deals. A cultural spotlight that the league hasn't seen in decades. But when someone comes in offering 7 figures to players who've been grinding their whole careers for a fraction of that, patience goes out the window. This is a reckoning. And it's long overdue. Clark's next move is the litmus test. If she signs with Project B, it's not just a win for that league. It's a vote of no confidence in the WNBA. It says, you had your chance, and you didn't do enough. And once she walks, how do you convince anyone else to stay? How do you convince a 21-year-old rookie or a 10-year veteran that their future is in a league where one injury can tank the ratings by more than half? Where only one player is treated like an investment, and everyone else is treated like background? That's the emotional cost the WNBA is going to have to pay if they don't respond fast and with substance. Not press releases, not vague promises, actual structural change, higher salaries, real marketing support for all players, better health protections, and above all, a league culture that doesn't pit its stars against each other in a popularity contest. Because right now, that's exactly what's happening. Wilson and Reed didn't wake up angry for no reason. They've been watching the entire conversation around women's basketball narrow down to one person. The pressure to perform, to stay relevant, to remain marketable in a system that increasingly rewards only one kind of visibility. It's crushing. And the fans feel it too. The growing divide, the media fixation on Clark, the undercurrent of resentment, the constant debates about who deserves what and why. This isn't just a league in transition. It's a league on the edge of a cliff. If the WNBA wants to stay on top, it has to evolve now. No more waiting for the next CBA. No more hoping things just work out. The league needs to confront its dependence on a single superstar and start treating all its athletes like the professionals they are. Because once Project B gets momentum, it won't be enough to just keep players from leaving. The WNBA will need to convince them to come back. And that's a much harder sell. At the end of the day, the question isn't whether Clark deserves the money. Of course she does. The question is, why hasn't the WNBA given her a reason to stay? And more importantly, why hasn't it given every other player a reason to believe they're worth just as much? That's the challenge ahead. And whether Clark says yes or no to Project B, the clock is ticking. Drop your thoughts below. Would you take the deal if you were in Clark's shoes? Should the WNBA be doing more to protect its players and stop the exodus before it begins? Like this video if you're following the drama. Share it if you think this conversation needs to be louder. And subscribe, because the next few months might change the future of women's sports forever.